Alright, I'm Alex Dyer, and I'm going to be talking to you about why I think attention makes consciousness phenomenal. Alright, attempt focusing on the column of X's while reading both sentences at the same time. Rapidly become aware we simply cannot read two sentences simultaneously. Our optic array contains more information than is possibly processable, and we only seem to become aware of what we attend to within a given perceptual scene. I'm going to be arguing that we are only conscious of what we attend to. In short, consciousness is attention. This begs the question, what exactly is attention? Well, it doesn't appear to be a single thing. Instead, attention is a range of mechanisms our nervous system has evolved in order to focus information processing to a subset of specific things, places, ideas, or moments in time. Well, who said consciousness had to be a single thing as well? Despite the vast amount of information in your retinal array, you were only conscious of what you attended to. We don't need a metacognitive, re-representational account to explain this phenomenon. The sensations of the interpreted sentence were converted into more detailed perceptual representations with availability to working memory via attentional control mechanisms. The neglected sentence simply did not reap the benefits of enhanced activity in the attended foveal region via enhanced, altered, and/or sharpened tuning of the cortical neurons. This is referred to as covert attention. Objects outside of our focal point do not receive the cortical processing required to render the meaning of the sentence phenomenally conscious. When we attend to one of the two sentences, we're attending to one or two strings of objects within a scene. We are phenomenally conscious of both sentences' existence because they both occupy relative proportions of space in our retinal array. However, we only access the relevant information from one sentence because we arrange our bodies in a specific manner while simultaneously devoting more cortical processing to the relevant portions of the retinal array. J.J. Gibson identified this relation between the visual perspective and the external world as optical flow. Now, optical flow acts like the spotlight of our attention. We direct our sense organs at a stimulus. This is referred to as overt attention. Our optical array acts like a sophisticated zoom lens, selectively processing specific objects within the scene. Our minds and bodies act in concert to tend to render the richness of our environment phenomenally conscious. Consciousness does not occur without some sort of attention to the relevant perceptual modalities. Alright, let's go through some empirical support for Prince's error theory. Several paradigms have been designed to investigate attentional processing, and the results of similar studies have yielded conflicting results. One of the most common experimental measures is Michael Posner's cueing paradigm, in which participants are asked to focus on a fixation point between two boxes and utilize covert attention to indicate the presence of a stimuli. When participants are cued to a certain location, reaction time is decreased compared to an invalid cue. This is an example of lower-level pre-attentive processing. When primed to expect a specific stimuli, our attentional mechanisms become more efficient at converting a target sensation into a perception. This could be the result of covert attention mechanisms priming for representations in a particular region of the phobia. This could be the result of overt attention mechanisms biasing microsaccades in a certain direction. Or, if my intuitions are correct, a combination of both are happening for optimal attentional processing. Posner's cueing paradigm clearly illustrates how the effects of attentional processing persisting over time and influencing further perceptual representation. A rapid serial visual presentation, multiple stimuli are presented one after the other as participants are asked to report the presence of a target stimulus. Several interesting phenomena have been observed and described with this method. First, consider inattentional or perceptual blindness. When asked to find a set of 6 target letters in a rapid serial visual presentation of letters containing one meaningless shape, 63% of subjects do not report the presence of a dissimilar stimuli when asked. There are also popular videos on the internet in which one is asked to count the number of passes a basketball team makes in a given period of time. Amusingly, very few viewers report the gorilla walking through the middle of the scene. Known as change blindness, this phenomenon supports the necessity of attention for phenomenal consciousness. Can there be consciousness without attention? The dissociation between consciousness and attention is an empirical concern for cognitive scientists. As a student of cognitive science, my scientific perspective is just merely a shrug of the shoulders. As far as I'm concerned, without sufficient evidence for a double dissociation, we do not know if the processes are distinct using the methods of contemporary cognitive science. Consider a study in which subjects were briefly presented with a picture of a car in their periphery, while attending to the task of finding a rotated T in a group of L's. Because subjects' reports of the image in the periphery were considerably accurate, Christoph Koch concluded this to be a case of conscious perception in the near absence of attention. I agree with Jesse Prinz when he was reviewing the experiment that the near absence is not the complete absence of attention. After 10 hours of training for the task, the motivation to attend to the central task was most likely decreased, resulting in a higher probability of subjects attending to the larger, more striking, dissimilar stimulus in the periphery. This seems to be a result of neglecting overt attentional mechanisms. I am claiming that specific attentional processes are embodied. More specifically, somatosensory processes enabling overt attention play a crucial role in our ability to perceive the richness of the external environment. Without being compensated monetarily and accordingly, most persons would find the task of locating rotated T's in a set of L's for 10 hours unappealing. The experimenters did not seem to acknowledge the possibility of a potential confound, but attentional priming. After extended periods of sustained attention, understandably fatigued subjects likely imagined their own cars in longing anticipation of the near future. Sustained attention tasks exclusively investigate covert attentional mechanisms, yet do not acknowledge the sensor-motor processes that determine our optical flow and our overt attention. Our foveal regions, used to process the tiny L's and T's, have high visual acuity. In contrast, our peripheral regions have low visual acuity, enabling motion tracking and the detection of large objects. Our visual system has evolved specific mechanisms to detect precisely the kinds of distractor stimuli used in the study. Transmitting signals from our optical array, retinal ganglion cells convey the foveal region to project rich, detailed information on the LGN of our thalamus. It's sent to the striate cortex for further visual processing. Retinal ganglion cells also project to the superior colliculi, implicated in the control of eye movements. The dorsal action and the ventral perception streams are not the only visual processing pathways. The human visual system relies on microsaccades, brief, constant, and voluntary eye movements that occur multiple times in the span of a second. This is controlled in part by the technopulvinar pathway, which transmits information from the eyes to the superior colliculus and the pulvinar nucleus of the thalamus. The pathway controls eye movements and is a crucial overt attentional mechanism, granting many species the ability to react to stimuli in our peripheries. Our system has evolved specific mechanisms to detect precisely the kinds of distractor stimuli used in the study. Embodied attention can be applied to related dissociation attempts as well. Take the example of the nude experiment. A bunch of experimenters masked a low contrast image on one eye with a high contrast image on the other. The experimenters used nude images as a low contrast image to provoke attention. Ironically, when the intraocular displays were removed, the subjects' target detections were biased toward the location of the nude. This led many to conclude that this at least counts as a single dissociation between attention and consciousness. I must repeat, the near absence of consciousness is enough evidence for a near dissociation. This is not nearly close to the double dissociation required to distinguish the two processes with a high degree of certainty. Prinz, historically not a fan of inactive perception, has a clever response to this experiment. Perhaps the nude attracts saccades and not attention. This would facilitate target detection when the target is displayed in the region that was occupied by the nude. The increases are observed in the dorsal stream, which plays a role in saccadic eye movements and spatial perception. Prinz holds a curious position, acknowledging our reliance on certain overt attentional mechanisms, yet denying the possibility of particular somatosensory processes existing as an attentional process or a conscious phenomenon. Here are the two competing interpretations. Interpretation number 1. If the nude was conscious without attention, there is sufficient evidence for a single dissociation between consciousness and attention. The explanation boils down to a non-access perceptual process allowing for increased target detection. Prinz's interpretation argues that microsaccades, not attention, explain the phenomena. A non-conscious, non-access process is facilitating target detection during the sustained attention task. Now, account 1 allows for non-access phenomenology. Roads to the hard problem of consciousness are not preferable. Account number 2 begs the question: if the nude image did not enter the subject's ventral stream processing, and the dorsal stream processes are not conscious, how does this explain the subject target detection location bias? It doesn't. I accept the following claims. Consciousness just is attention. Overt attention is a form of attention, and overt attention is a form of consciousness. Now, Prinz claims A and rejects C. In order to defend A, he explains away the phenomenon in terms of non-conscious overt attentional processes. If he does not accept B, attention isn't the mechanism responsible for the observed location bias, it's the non-conscious dorsal stream processing. This forces us to choose between a non-access, phenomenally conscious process and an unconscious process. If we only accept A, the proposed explanations have nothing to do with consciousness because they have nothing to do with attention. Uninterpreted sensations resulting in seemingly conscious behaviors is not a scientific or satisfactory explanation of the phenomenon. The final two claims are my proposal for explanation number 3. Overt attention is responsible for the nude image phenomenon. Overt attention is a form of embodied consciousness utilizing patterns of dynamic somatosensory activity. Prinz rejects C and E, but relies on D as an explanation to defend A's validity from potential dissociation. Accepting B entails the acceptance of all claims. Explanation number 1 entails consciousness without attention. Explanation number 2 entails an explanation without reference to consciousness or attention. And explanation number 3 entails no dissociation between consciousness and attention. Explanation number 3 is the most viable explanation because it is the only one specifying a sensible sensory modality to account for the phenomenon. To conclude, phenomenal consciousness is the feel of our experiences. We do not need a metacognitive account to account for a phenomenally conscious pain perception. To feel is by definition to focus attention with touch. Embodied attention is one of the many and most basic attentional mechanisms responsible for phenomenal consciousness. Without an account of the attentional processes active and across every sensory modality, we will not have a complete account of phenomenal consciousness.